Good afternoon or morning or evening, depending on where you are around the world. I am Marcus Holmes, HR Passion Guy, and this is our fourth installment of Passion Fridays, live here on LinkedIn Live, and we're also streaming live to YouTube as well as Facebook. Good afternoon, Christina Smith. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that there's an opportunity for you to share for others to join us as well. I am grateful to be on again, and drop in the comments wherever you are and the temperature that's there. It's 84 degrees where I am in the beautiful northwest side of Detroit, and this is somewhat a summer reprieve from the 90-degree weather with 100-degree heat indexes that we've experienced over the last few days. But I am grateful to be here to be able to feel it. So I will not complain about these very hot and torrid temperatures that we might be experiencing. Drop in the comments wherever you are. What is the weather like where you are, and where are you? Drop that in the comments as we are getting started here and awaiting our guest to arrive. We're excited to have her on. HR Passion LLC is what some would call a side hustle. It is HR consulting and all things passion between. It's where people and their passions meet. And one of the many things I love to do is connect people to the things they love and to their passions. And so if you are looking for a career coach or training, if you are looking for HR advice and counsel, if you are looking for stellar candidates, all of those things, I believe we have a network that we can connect you to what you need if it's not something that we readily can do within our bandwidth and capacity. But we believe that many of the things that you might need are within our bandwidth, maybe not always within our capacity from a time and resource standpoint. But that's why we have strategic partners who have partnered with us in this effort to ensure that everything that you might need, that you would have access to. So you can check us out at hrpassionllc.com. Pardon the dust there. We are building up that site to make it a place that you will want to come back and not only do business with us, but a place that you will want to come back and get valuable resources, some of which will be free to you, and that you can share with others in your circle of influence as well. We decided once LinkedIn gave us the privilege of having LinkedIn Live that we would do at least a Passion Fridays, where we would be bringing things that would be of both business interest and professional and personal interest to you. That would be information that you can use. And so as we're awaiting our guest, I will share with you some of the statistics that you may or may not find startling, but there are statistics nonetheless I think we need to be aware of. Current statistics show the lack of progress among the corporate workforce as it relates to diversity and inclusion. According to data from human resources consulting company Mercer, 64% of workers in entry-level positions are white. In the top executive ranks, however, 85% of positions are held by whites. And what this demonstrates for us is that the promotional gap that African Americans and minorities face, that gap is real. And according to the Economic Policy Institute, women and minorities continue to under-earn their white male colleagues. And so there are organizations out there such as You Sow, which is an organization that's pressuring companies to disclose their hiring practices, their pay, promotion, and upskilling information. Even having all of these decades of push for wage equality, women and minorities still fall short in many areas as it relates to opportunity and pay. Senior economist Elise Gould, who wrote in the State of Working America Wages 2019, says the data not only shows a rising inequality through the 2000s, but also the persistence and in some cases the worsening of wage gaps by gender and race. At every decile, wage growth since 2000 was faster for white and Hispanic workers than for Black workers. Linnea Irvin, rather, who is the president at nonprofit Center for Talent Innovation, said corporate diversity has to go beyond just representation. She goes on to say that companies need to commit to addressing bias and dismantling bias in their institutions and really taking a hard look at what dynamics are at play that create barriers to advancement, she says. She points to several areas where corporate policies could and should be reexamined, such as the entire recruiting life cycle and the practices associated, performance management systems, promotion panels, and compensations. So we wanted to talk today a little bit about diversity and inclusion, and hopefully our guests will be joining us momentarily just to get into the conversation about, there are a number of organizations that are coming out with bold and powerful statements about their commitment to equity and about their plans to make their organizations more equitable. But it will really take an internal look at the policies and procedures that you have in place as it relates to your talent. I was sharing with someone in preparation for this talk today that many companies don't really utilize their performance data in a way that gives them a line of sight to the issues. And because talent analytics in particular has come so far, most companies should at least have a software as a service that they can synthesize their performance data to be able to determine where the line of sight to their talent is and where the opportunities for growth in that talent lie and what actions then they may take from that growth. When we get Brittany Cole on, who is our guest today, we'll talk a little bit about three things that she says are key to positioning yourself in this environment, in any environment, so that you can achieve the career results that you want to achieve. But I think it's incumbent, and we can flip it a little bit so that organizations see these three areas. There are three things that an organization might consider when they are thinking about more equitable systems and processes for people and their talent. And the first is exposure. As an African American male, I grew up, I'm a 70s baby. I grew up with a dad who was an Army man, and he would tell me every day that I was as smart as anybody in the world and that I could be anything in the world. And that just like everybody else, I put my pants on one leg at a time. He would tell me then that you have to work twice as hard and be twice as good for them to even consider you their equal. And so I think that put into me a certain work ethic around performance of having to achieve at higher levels. And performance is great. A company that does not have performers does not drive business results, right? But what if I am performing and working and doing everything, dotting every I and crossing every T, as it were, but there is, at the top level, no exposure? It's incumbent upon robust organizations who pursue diversity and inclusion as a part of their core values, that your system builds into its processes exposure. If it's talent analytics, which is a great way, through a software as a service provider, to synthesize all of your learning management system data and to see who aligns with, our person's having trouble joining, who aligns with your core values. Who are the performers in the organization? And where do you want to help guide them to be over the trajectory of their time with the organization? What are the learning experiences that they should have? What are the connections and engagement that they should have? So you got to build with your top core. And think about it now. If 85% of the top executives are Caucasian, what is your organization prepared to do to give exposure to performers who might not normally be in the line of sight of those persons? I think we've got someone. I think she's trying to join and we're having such a difficulty getting her in. We're going to try it again. We are live. Anything, I guess, could happen while you're live. Let's try it. See if we can get her in. Okay. Thank you for your patience. One day I may have an executive producer. It's not that day. That's me. Director, whatever you call it. So you've got to, at that, what does your plan for exposure? Because exposure can't just be the people that are in the line of sight in your line of business. So the executive over finance can't only know about the performers who will ultimately be leaders in finance or will be key parts of the puzzle, if you will, in finance. That finance lead needs to have a line of sight for all of the business for performance and be involved in the rewards and recognition throughout to ensure that we're taking an unbiased approach to how we give opportunities to performers, and where people aren't performing as we had expected them to, where we are doing targeted interventions for the purpose of exposure so that people will be able to see. I am so excited.
Hi. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. It's not working.
Imagine a host who has a rock star guest and he can't get her on. He's like freaking out.
No, you are just fine. I've never used this plugin, so I'm glad to know that this exists. So
I'm so glad to have you.
Something new today.
I am going to double back. I've been kind of listening to some of the interview footage from different interviews from you, and one of them really struck me that I wanted to talk to you about, and I kind of forayed into it.
Sure.
I'll go back and you can fix it for me. But I don't know what you call this, Brittany. This is Brittany Cole, and she is CEO for Career Thrivers. She is a Tedx speaker coach. She is a phenomenal woman, and she does a lot of work with minorities, particularly women and millennials. But I also want to just let other people know that she's a career coach. And so I wanted to have you on, especially in this environment. And something that you said in one of those interviews resonated with me. You talked about, I'm calling it opportunity perspective. I don't know what you call it. I missed what you call it. But when I was growing up, I'm dating myself, in the 70s, my dad said, hey, what you have to do is know that you're as smart as anybody in this world. He would tell me that every day. And you put your pants on one leg at a time like everybody, but you have to work twice as hard and be twice as good for them to see you as their equal. Yeah. So my work ethic was around that performance, right? But what you say and what I call the opportunity perspective, and please forgive me if I got the wrong, I made that name up, so I know it's not right.
I love it.
But you say, really, the first thing is exposure. The second thing is image. The last thing is performance. And so in this environment where we're almost thirsty for diversity and inclusion, I was saying an organization then needs to build into their systems where there's a line of sight to the talent. So your system is built for exposure, right? Yes. So that the finance lead that's in this executive suite, where Mercer study says 85% of the executives are still white males.
Absolutely.
That finance lead is not just looking at the people who can become finance leads. He's looking at all of the talent in the organization to give them exposure. Because guess what? He might sponsor an employee resource group, or he might mentor for one of them how to gain access. So you got to give this line of sight and give everybody exposure, the performers, and those who haven't performed like you thought that they would, so that you can see the kind of engagement and experiences that might boost their performance. Yes. What do you call that three? Do you call it your branding package? What do you call those three things?
So I have to tell you, Marcus, I cannot take credit for that framework. So that is actually research from Harvey Coleman in
Okay.
1996, early 90s, maybe a little bit earlier than 96.
Okay.
But he set out to study career advancement, like what moves the needle for people in terms of their career.
Mhm.
And so he got this research back, and these three areas came up, which are called PIE. Some of you may be familiar with that terminology, but it's performance, image, and exposure, just like you shared.
Yeah.
And so typically, if I'm giving a talk or doing a workshop and we're talking about career advancement, I always love to just ask people, like, if you have, performance, image, and exposure, those three, what percentage would you give each relative to the role that they play in career advancement?
Mhm.
Most people, just like you shared, automatically note that performance is first.
Mhm.
But rather, performance is only 10% of career
Mhm.
advancement. The other
Mhm.
90% is image
Mhm.
and exposure. Exposure being 60% of career advancement, and image being the other 30%. So, with that insight in mind, and how it relates to the work that I do, is really helping professionals say, okay, what does this mean? This means that you have to be intentional about your personal brand. And so I
Mhm.
like to share that I do personal brand coaching, but not in the traditional sense of like, what's my website, what's my logo, and what are my, my brand colors. It's more
Uh-huh.
about what is your message? What is your, let's dive into your identity so that you are sharing and telling a career story that is intentional to help cultivate your personal brand, because we all have one. We all have a brand.
Sure.
We just may or may not be in the driver's seat
Yeah.
of what it looks like, or even be aware of it. So really helping clients with both of those things, being crafting what it is, but then also being aware of it so that you can shape it, so that you can speak to it, recognizing that that's what moves the needle relative to exposure. Exposure is about, we often say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's
Mhm.
not who you know, it's who knows you. And that
Yeah.
who knows you piece is a result of that exposure, also a result of that image. And then to your point, Marcus, from a work leadership perspective, knowing that then, when you layer on diversity and inclusion, how is your organization being intentional about creating more pathways of exposure for your diverse talent? And so we do that work with corporations.
Wonderful. And I want to ask you then about that second layer, because I know corporations need to do that work. That's a very valued part of the work. That
Mhm.
image layer, there was a time when I first got into the work field that men wore black suits, brown suits, blue suits, or gray suits, white
Mhm.
shirt, maybe some color in the tie. I wouldn't wear a red shirt probably back in that time.
Yeah.
And what can we do for individuals and organizations to make sure we have a broadened understanding in diversity and inclusion about what appropriate image is?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And there's this other language that comes right alongside image. It's called executive presence. So if you're listening and you have ever broached the conversation of your pathway to senior leadership, oftentimes you'll hear this feedback around, we need to work on your executive presence. Now, let me say two things about that. One, executive presence is a real thing. So executive presence is this idea of image and communication, how those two things come together. But also, executive presence can be used as a bias barrier for diverse talent, because oftentimes executive presence is determined through the lens of talent that doesn't look like you or I. So again, it goes back to this idea of, one, if you are a leader in an organization looking to cultivate a more inclusive culture, how intentional are you being around this idea of executive presence, but also balancing that with authenticity? And I think one of the movements, to your point, I like to say I grew up in corporate. I started my career in sales. I can't tell you how many black suits I've had over my career, how many navy, how many grays. If I'm being a little bit, on the edge, I may throw a
Yeah,
brown or gray in there,
right.
and I look at my closet now, I'm like, I have yellow and green and red, it's changed a lot. It's
Mhm.
definitely changed a lot. But I think at the end of the day, as the talent, then we have to be really intentional. I think this is regardless, because even myself as a business owner, like I'm literally in my office today with a black jacket on because I
Hmm.
just got out off of a call presenting a proposal to a C-suite team for a contract. So it's like I'm intentional. So again, it's a sense of intentionality around
Hmm.
the culture that you work in. So the culture of the organization, what you wear as an employee at Google is very different from what you wear as an employee at Merck. Right. It's just a different culture. So being intentional around that, not just throwing something on, but even in this virtual environment, right? I mean, from the waist up, as we like to say,
Right,
depending on, the call that you're on or who
right.
you're speaking with or what you're doing, being really intentional about your look, about your image, and making sure that fits the environment that you're going into. But it's also representative of who you are.
Yeah. And then in performance, I wanted to talk a little bit about that because people say performance is performance, but there is the opportunity for bias to be in that. What are you measuring? Is what you're measuring as a core competency aligned with what you say your core values are? And
Mhm.
whether or not the way that you're measuring, the lenses through what you're looking, are really measuring something that drives business results. Because customer service and customer orientation, for an example, as a competency, how you're measuring that might tend to disengage and disenfranchise people of color who socialize differently. And so
Sure.
unless you're really, have a line of sight of how that connects to business results, okay, is that person able to build and maintain relationships with our customer? And does that increase upsells or does that increase
Sure.
customer loyalty? If you're not really measuring the throughput to that, there could be some bias in that. If you can talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, well, I would say you hit the nail on the head with the M word that we often don't consider, and that's measurement.
Hmm.
What is your tool to measure these great capabilities that you have on this great slide? And I know, what I see often is that there isn't an objective way to measure. So then this performance review rating, et cetera, becomes extremely subjective. And it's not to say that there isn't subjectivity in the review process. Of course there is, right? All of us are biased. So let's just throw
Sure.
that out there. It's a natural part of just being human.
Right.
But what helps to mitigate that some is by saying, hey, we have a really well defined, specific structure in place where our people leaders have been trained on it. They also are receiving consistent diversity and inclusion training and development, not a once a year unconscious bias 1 hour, and we've covered the bases. The research shows, you don't have to take my word for it. The research shows that doesn't cut it.
Hmm.
So then those two things, I've got a measurement in place. I'm also doing my due diligence as an organization to train my people leaders at the mid-level, right? Because oftentimes what you see too in corporations is that those learning and development dollars, especially when you get into more individualized coaching, executive coaching, things like that, those dollars are reserved for your senior level leaders. And so then you take a look at your emerging talent. And then what has happened in the past, I feel like we're in the midst of this awakening, but what has happened in the past oftentimes is for your emerging talent, their leadership development, especially for diverse talent, then falls on the responsibility of the ERGs, the
Hmm.
employee research groups, to
Hmm.
do professional development for the people. And it's like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What investment are we making in our people
Yeah.
to really ensure that their performance is being evaluated in a way that is as fair as we can get it? And this idea of we talk a lot about diversity. Diversity just means that you have difference that you can see or difference that you can't see. I
Hmm.
like to think of diversity as a speed bump on the pathway and journey to inclusion and really equity. Like equity is the goal. Being diverse is not the goal. Like being
Right.
diverse is like, okay, that's of course you have
Right.
diversity. What
Right.
are you doing to include that difference?
Right.
Inclusion to make it an integrated part of every layer of your business.
Right.
Not this set aside HR function. Like inclusion benefits your business, your bottom line. So how are
Right.
you aligning this learning and development training consistently with your business outcomes, but then also ensuring that you have outcomes then as the goal that aren't determined by the difference within your organization. And so, those things really, really help with the overall employee engagement experience.
Yeah. I want to pivot a little bit and go back because you spent a long time at Pfizer. I want you to talk a little bit about your time there. There was an opportunity that came and maybe wasn't at the right
Oh, you
time.
did your homework,
Just a little bit.
I
Just a
love
little
it.
bit. And one of the things in that I wonder, when I was listening, I said, well, what was it like for an African American young woman to be in Pfizer and to have an opportunity that was going to put you on a product line like Viagra? I mean, everybody doesn't know Pfizer, even though a number of us do. Fortunately or unfortunately, depends if you take medicine. But everybody knows Viagra, even if you don't use it, right? And so what was that like being an African American young woman in that organization?
Yes. So let me answer it broadly and then talk about that experience, if that's
Sure.
okay. So as a business owner now of a leadership development firm with an incredibly brilliant team that I just am so tickled to be able to work with every single day, I now classify as an entrepreneur. Every single day, I lean on my experience from Pfizer. And so I had the opportunity of working at Pfizer for about 12 years, doing everything from sales to marketing to diversity and inclusion work through our ERGs to sales management. And all of those experiences are a huge part of where I am today. I mean, I lean on them. I think about them all the time,
Mm-hmm.
especially the marketing experience. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really treasured that time. I treasured the opportunities for, promotion where I was, tapped for opportunities, said, hey, have you thought about this? Mentors that said, hey, you haven't thought about it, but I think you'd be really great at that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about getting you on the path for this or that, or me saying, hey, I'm really interested in marketing. I'm in sales right now. What does that transition look like? So then speaking of marketing, having some really great mentors and sponsors along the path to advocate for me in the rooms that I wasn't in, I was able, long story short, to identify a role on the Viagra team. And I'll say a couple things about the experience when I share this that I think are really important for people to grasp.
Mm-hmm.
The first one that comes to mind is that your experience is your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is people will often tell you what they think your journey will be like through the lens of what they've experienced, but that's not always what yours will be. So I say that to say, I was told coming into this journey of transitioning from sales to marketing that, hey, most people, apply for a role, 5 to 6 times before they, make the transition from sales to marketing. It's really tough. Like it's really competitive. And I knew that, like, it wasn't just that people were telling me that, it kind of reinforced it, but I saw that, like, I knew of the people that were like, oh yeah, I'm on my 4th, brand product, team interview for this role. So I say that to say I saw this opportunity and, I had marketing as a part of my IDP. I'm doing all the things, development opportunities, raising my hand for projects, networking with marketers to learn more, doing what we call reverse field rides. So coming up and shadowing from the field into our headquarters to get more exposure to the work and also exposure to the team, back to Pi. And so through that, this opportunity comes up and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, they said like, use it takes a few times. So I'm like, okay, well, let me get started. Let me put my name in the hat. And to your point, this was a brand that I'm like, oh my gosh, I would love to work on. And also it was a hiring manager that had a reputation for just being an amazing developer of people, which
Wow.
I have always loved leadership development. And so that really was the thing that made me most excited to get to work for this woman who just had this great brand equity when it came to people leadership that wasn't necessarily the reputation at the time of marketing overall, right? So I'm like, okay, this will be a great like first time experience. Well, long story short, went through the process and was extended an offer. I'll never forget it. It was a Friday, like 5:15 in the afternoon. And she calls me and she's like, I didn't want you to have to wait through the weekend and, hold you over for the weekend. I want to let you know. And like my heart's beating so fast, Marcus. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I feel the beads of sweat on my forehead. I'm like, okay, what's she going to tell me? It's fine either way. She tells me I got the job, Marcus. And I literally screamed like whatever professional response you're supposed to have. I'm like, out the door. I was so excited. I gathered myself like, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, great. Thank you. I got off the phone and I made 2 calls. I made one call to my fiance. So I was living in Chattanooga at the time. I was engaged. My now husband, but fiance at the time was living in Nashville. So I called him. He was excited. My second call was to our wedding planner.
Ah,
And I told her, I'll never forget. I said, hey, about our cocktail hour, I think I want to make it a New York theme. Do you think we can get like some taxi centerpieces for the tables? I mean, I'm like, we are doing this. I am going to New York. This is my dream role with an amazing team, amazing manager. And as life would have it, had some personal decisions to make. So briefly, one, throughout the process, right, you get the terms in the package. So had some surprises there, but then also more importantly, my husband ended up getting into grad school. He was on the path for his MBA. So he had applied to NYU, which I was like, like that's the one. He had gotten in there, and then he got into Goizueta Business School at Emory, and they gave him a full ride. So it's like, okay, are we going to get married? So we're like 7 weeks out from our wedding. We got married in December of that year. So it's like, okay, are we going to get married and then I'm going to go to New York and you're going to go to Atlanta? I don't think so. So it was this really hard decision of like, hey, my belief is that family comes first. And oftentimes that means making a really hard decision. Would people have made a different decision and, prioritized work and just made the long distance work? Sure. But that wasn't in alignment with the vision that we had for our family in our first year of marriage. So I ended up turning down the job. And I like to say at that point, kind of all hell broke loose, in terms of just, as you can imagine, just the rightfully so, distrust is what it was, right? Because I had people that said, hey, I had advocates. I had people that said, yeah, Brittany's the person for the job. I got the job. Again, I'm a Black young woman. This opportunity came around on the first time, so there were a lot of people. I'll never forget this one gentleman told me to my face that I had committed career suicide by making that decision. So I had a lot of people. I became the topic of in many conversations that I was privy to, and many that I was not directly privy to. And so through that time, I learned what it meant to truly not only build your personal brand, but in my case, to really rebuild it. And so really going back and saying, okay, like I've got some work to do, because it wasn't like I turned down the job at the company down the street. I still work here. And I also have this aspiration. And so it took me about 1.5 years of really being intentional with communication, intentional with, taking on projects, intentional with performance, intentional with being just forgetting about being uncomfortable and having those uncomfortable conversations, intentional with turning that hiring manager who was extremely disappointed and frustrated into one of my biggest advocates. That entire process was really when I thought back on, I'm like that was me owning my brand, because at the time after I made that decision, it was like, oh yeah, like she throw her in the garbage, like we're on to the next, we gave her a shot. And then of course, as you know, I'm representing all of the other people that look like me as well. So you have that weight of, people that look like me that were also not happy with me. So, So 2015 and 2016 was a trying time, but happy to say the end of 2016, I was extended an offer that was tailor-made for me. It was a marketing role. We relocated. My husband had graduated. It was a full relocation package, and it was a digital marketing role doing a job that no one else had done before. So, I'm a woman of faith. And so I believe that there's always a divine order of things. And we made the tough decision, but it was the one that put me in line for this opportunity that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise. And so it was the best one for us at the time.
I was going to ask you, how did the other African Americans in the organization respond? Some of them may have wanted the same opportunity or thought, okay, you closed the door for all of us. So how did that weigh on you? How did that feel?
Yeah, I have a book that's coming out this year about resilience. And one of the things, as a little teaser that I talk about in the book, is my first experience with grief that wasn't associated with the loss of a loved one. And it was this experience. I didn't recognize I was grieving until maybe like a year later, but I grieved my decision and the result from it, because there were several people that looked like me. One young lady in particular who was number 2 in line for the role. She was another Black woman. And what I didn't know during the time, but that I learned after, because of the timing of my decision. So we spent maybe like a week or so, like trying to make it work in terms of the offer and the timing and when I would move, juxtaposed against our wedding, all of the things. And so because of the timing of that, the team actually lost the budget for the role. So it's like, talk about going from like bad to like way worse. And as I was going through the experience, one, I didn't even have any real knowledge of like even that process.
Sure.
But when I learned it afterwards, so what that meant was that the young woman that was number two, who was a colleague and also a friend of mine, she couldn't get the role because the team lost the budget for it. So it was definitely tough. It was definitely a lot, many, like countless conversations of helping people to understand, like, why I made the decision, what my aspirations are. And also then going back and saying, hey, here's what I learned from this, and here's how I would probably approach this differently, the next time. But also, I will say I would say, a handful of people stick out in my mind in terms of truly being like cornerstones for me, truly, in terms of my work at Pfizer during this time. One was a white male. And I share that to say sometimes we look for sponsors and advocates that look like us. And I think that sometimes that does us a disservice. Now, I had one real strong sister, that a woman that really, like, from an emotional standpoint, helped me through that moment. And we became really close through that journey because she understood it. She got it. She helped me frame up some of the tougher conversations with people that were like, we don't even want to talk to you. And I'm like, I'm putting this meeting on your calendar again. We're going to have this conversation. I had to be really, really persistent through that in some of those discussions, but really having those people that said, hey, I see you. I understand this is not the end of the world. Like, people make decisions for their family and stand by them. And that's what you did in this case. And yes, it's hard, but you made the right decision for you, and no one else really should have a say about it, And so that transfer of confidence, that transfer of, affirmation really helped me during those moments to say, okay, I need to walk in here with my head held high. I'll never forget, it was that following year, our year beginning sales meeting. All of our colleagues, like everybody that's like in our, area and marketing is at this meeting. And I'll just never forget, like, walking around that hotel in those conference rooms and, like, seeing the side eyes, and I'm like, oh my, like, if I can make it through this, I can make it through anything. So yeah. It was quite an experience for sure.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a little later on, but I think I'll pivot to this now about your book and about resilience. One of the beautiful video clips that I saw was a tribute to your mother. And it seems that her passing happened in another pivotal point in your journey. Can you share about that with us? Because I think resilience is an important discussion around diversity and inclusion, because I think when you know where people have come from and what they've experienced, if you have some empathetic inquiry into their past, then you're able to better position them for greatness. So certainly. If you can share from that.
Sure. Yes. So the very first time that I won a sales award at Pfizer, I was dating my now husband, and anyone that's ever been in pharmaceutical sales, that those awards trips are amazing. Okay. And so this brother was excited because I guess he thought he was going on this trip with me. And I'm like, no, I'm taking my mom. So my mom and I mean, my best friend, we went on so many girls' trips together that I'm so grateful for now. I have so many amazing photos and just memories of our time together that is just like, it's just awesome to still be able to recall those moments. And so I shared with you, the time came back around. I was able to get a marketing role. It worked out for our family. My husband had a job. So everything worked out for us to make the relocation to New York. So that was in end of February of 2017. So we finally make this move, relocate from Chattanooga, Tennessee to Manhattan. We're like, okay, we're moving to New York. This is my first time moving outside of my hometown state, like outside of the state of Tennessee. So we're like, okay, if we're going, let's just get the whole experience. So we moved from our 3,500 square foot home to a 1-bedroom apartment that is so small they don't even put the square footage on the form. But we wanted to experience. We're like, hey, let's do this. We are doing this. And everyone was excited. My mom, I call her my chief cheerleader. Like, she was like, yes, I'm excited for you. Like, I'm excited for y'all. I'm coming down there this summer. Like, we're going to have a good time. And so about 3 months after I relocated there, she passed away unexpectedly. And so I was at work. It was a Monday when I got that call. And so I definitely talk about, just my journey in the book and how sometimes we have this idea of resilience that it's about being able to bounce back. But that's usually what people, like when you ask them, like, what does resilience mean? It's about this ability to bounce back from adversity. And I think that perhaps we need to redefine resilience, and that's what I talk about in the book. If you think about having a rubber band in your index fingers and pulling it tight, it's so tight that you can kind of see that rubber band starting to crack. That's often what happens just through, loss and tragedy and adversity and change in our lives. And so if you think about this idea of bouncing back, if you let that rubber band go on one end, it pops back on your finger, like it hurts. It does damage. And so I think that's what happens oftentimes when we try to position ourselves as having had rushed back to this normal state or this before the occurrence, fill in the blank with whatever that thing is, state. And it does us more harm than good, because I believe deep loss changes you, that you don't go back to, like, I'm not the same woman that I was, the morning of July 4th or 5th of 2017, or July 4th even, was that evening was the last time I spoke with my mom that night. So I'm not that same woman anymore. This process of grief, this loss, it's changed me, and being okay with that, to really redefine resilience in a new way, to say it's not about you being able to bounce back. Resilience really is about, how do you thrive through? How do you really take what you have experienced and extrapolate the learnings from it, be what you need through it, and serve as you go to help someone else that may be facing the same thing. So I'm excited. We are excited to get that out the end of Q3. And so, and I think it really is important when you add in this layer of diversity and inclusion, because oftentimes as a Black woman, I can definitely speak to this, showing up, because just like you started this conversation, you have this mindset of, well, I've got to work twice as hard, to get half as much. I've got to be all of these things. And you kind of walk around with this cape on. That's not real. It's not a realistic expectation to think that you always have to be perfect, amazing, on top of everything. You can't share what's really going on for fear that, oh my gosh, people are going to see you as less than. I love Brene Brown's work because of that. I think her work on vulnerability and shame is so critical to this kind of conversation, because it just speaks to this sense of being able to be authentic about where you are, and recognizing that in that is really where the strength lies, and taking on this perspective of a learner to be able to thrive through.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to that book. Maybe we can have you back when you're on your book tour.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Stephen Waldron was going to join us. He's having trouble connecting, because I wanted to tap into some of your great expertise around personal branding and things, but I am going to share a screen so you can see his resume. I'm going to redact a little bit of the information. I don't know if you would want all his information out there, but maybe you'll join us in the comments, and you can, because one of the things that also resonated in one of the interviews, you talked about sometimes you get clients and they're kind of all over the map. They don't know what they want. And you ask them and they're like, oh, I don't really know. And so it's about streamlining into what you really want. I tell people, what are the 20 companies you want to work for? And then go do some investigation about the culture and how the people are loving working there or not loving working there. If that means going on Glassdoor or LinkedIn, and follow it for a little bit, and then try to make a foray into it. But make sure that your personhood, your authentic self, aligns with that organization that you're trying to connect to, or challenge yourself about the person that you want to be to connect to that organization. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can maybe give him some pointers and tips. And then if he joins us, that would be great. I see Christina Smith is here, and she's going to get her book. That would be wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me see. Hold on one second. I'm going to redact a little bit of information. Stephen, if you're watching, I wouldn't want to, we can, get you some exposure on Facebook, but that's another
That's right.
Let me share the screen.
And that's also a thought too, I think, as you're thinking about what to include on a resume, new age, if you will, I think your city and state is fine, and cell number. So, you don't necessarily have to feel the need to put your, complete address on your resume. Of course, maybe other areas of the application process you do share that information, but it's not always necessary on a resume.
Okay. Are you seeing his resume?
I'm not seeing it on my side.
I'm sharing.
You're streaming on LinkedIn?
I'm streaming on LinkedIn, but I am on Restream. So I'm wondering if you can, it says I'm reading, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'm just seeing you and I.
Oh.
But I can pull up, I have my phone here, so I can pull it up on LinkedIn so I can see what you're showing on there because
yeah, I am actually looking on LinkedIn, and you're right, I'm only seeing us. So it says that it's sharing, but I don't see it. Let's see. Maybe it takes a second. That won't be good. Okay. Don't you just love live? I love it. I love it.
Yeah. It's one of the great things about live for sure. I'll add to what you were sharing about, clients and knowing what you want. I'm really excited. Later today, we're dropping a new episode on our podcast. So if you are listening and you're not familiar, we have a podcast. It's called the Career Thrivers Podcast. That's Thrivers, Thrivers. And I'm releasing an episode of actually something that I recorded for my clients, but one that I'm like, I think this will just be helpful for folks. And so let's just put it up on the podcast. But it's a brief vision exercise because I think part of knowing what you want is really doing the work that only you can do to really have a sense of the vision that you have for your life. So really sitting down and taking the time to go through some exercises to get a bit more clear about what is that vision? Like, how do I see myself working? Who do I see myself working with? What kind of work am I doing? What are my responsibilities? Am I going into work or am I working from home? Am I casual? Am I, dressed up? Like really having, taking the time to really visualize that really helps that process of being able to identify what it is that your aspirations are.
Yeah. And you also have a system called Thrive. You said you're big on acronyms and acrostics, things like that. And you spell that out. So maybe you can share some of that with Stephen that would help him along that journey.
Well, yeah. So you mentioned that. So I know you mentioned personal branding for him. Was there anything, I know we can't pull up his resume. Was there anything that stood out to you on his resume in terms of?
So, yeah, in the past, I've had some conversation with him just through LinkedIn because he's looking for an opportunity. And he has a master's degree in human resources, but his bachelor's and experience is more alignment with some history and project management. And so you got to look at the things that are transferable out of that when you're highlighting yourself and gaining exposure. And I look at networking. I know some people say, be very strategic about your networking. I think when you're foraying into a new industry, though, a broad networking might work just so that you start to make connections with people, but always give people back value. So, for instance, if you're trying to get into Lowe's and, the guy that runs Lowe's grew up in Lowe's, connect with him on LinkedIn, follow him, go to his blog post, invite him to yours. Start to build those connections so that you can start to find, okay, now who are the people in that organization? Because a lot of times people will start to connect you to other folks in the organization and find out, okay, what's the experience and pathway of people who have forayed into human resources from a totally different discipline. So you got to kind of do the work, as you're saying, okay, your vision is becoming this, but you can't just cast your net and look for a bite. You kind of have to do the work about, how do I transfer that project management stuff that was all non-human resources? So I convince somebody that I've got the people and process skills, because that's what you really need in human resources to be able to get into this industry. So it is not just applying forever everywhere and casting a net and kind of laying out, okay, I put that master's up there first. Well, that master's only means, putting on my recruiting hat, that only means that you have a great interest and you pursued it. but I want to know what is the experience or how much reskilling have you done to get to this opportunity? And so you kind of have to design that. If it's an elevator pitch, and sometimes your resume still in this day and time is an elevator pitch on a click, you got to design it in a way that it reads in a way that here's my strength and here's how they transfer to what you need.
Absolutely. And we coach clients around the 3 I's. And so I like to think of, the point of inspiration, like the point of being inspired by something, is to do something with that inspiration. So you get inspired to gain a new insight, either about yourself or about an area that you didn't know about, a job or an organization that you may or may not have been aware of. And then the third I, because sometimes we stop there. We're like, okay, I was really inspired. I gained a new insight. Then you got to implement. You have to implement what you've learned. Anyone that's done coaching with me knows that fast action work is a part of coaching. Like after we get off this coaching call, what are the bullet point items that you'd like me to hold you accountable to that you're going to implement, and making sure that you're really clear about those things. When we're talking about this idea of like resume and job search, one of the things that I find is that we oftentimes have been conditioned to think about our career as a sequence. Right. So we say, I worked at this employer for this many years and I had this role. And then here are the bullet points of experiences or leadership achievements or awards and recognition or however you frame up your resume. There's a more powerful way to do it. There's a more impactful way to do it. So you want to get into the practice of not talking about your career as a series in a sequence, but talking about your career story. What are the elements of your career story that you want someone to know about you, whether you have 20 seconds, 2 minutes, or 2 hours to tell them? So you sit down and you work through a really intentional career story that then it doesn't matter what question you're asked if we're talking about an interview. And it really doesn't even matter how much time you have. There is a framework. There is a storyline that you are sharing with people that encapsulates your experiences and your expertise that go back to, Marcus, just like you shared, this idea of not just what was the role that I had and when did I had it, but what were those transferable skills that then you can relate to many different job titles. Because I'll tell you, one of the results of COVID-19 is that, I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking career titles don't matter. They do. The reason why I say that, they matter. But your title is a space that you rent, right? So the reason why I sometimes say don't get so caught up. The point is this, don't get so caught up in your title or the title that you miss the impact in the learning and results that you did when you were in that role, right? Because you're in that role, you have that title, for a certain amount of time. So you have to think beyond the title. Like, what was the story? What did you learn? What did you achieve? What was something that challenged you when you were in that role that then you extrapolate to the next opportunity or the next opportunity that you want?
Yeah, that's great. Christina in the comments is saying Brittany is awesome. Does she work with up and coming entrepreneurs, Black women?
I do. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for asking. So we actually this week we opened back up. I do some VIP intensives for entrepreneurs that have a business where you're looking to monetize your experiences or your expertise, service-based business, and really helping you frame out your business model, your revenue model, that magnetic messaging, and then that fast action implementation. So you start building that revenue for your business. So if that's something that you're interested in, feel free to reach out to me. My email is just Brittany@careerthrivers.com. So feel free to send me an email. Would be happy to chat and share more about that with you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we're just almost to our hour. This time has blew past us.
It has gone by so fast.
What would you say to business leaders, CEOs, about diversity and inclusion and making changes now. Brittany, there are so many companies that are coming out with these bold statements. We're going to change. We're going to make it more equitable. We are committed to equity. We see you. I mean, some wonderful statements. I'm like, who's doing their marketing? They're really doing it up. But I'm wondering whether or not that is just more performative allyship than really getting something done. What would you say to those? Oh, there's Christina trying to join us. Say to those that really want to get it done, what should leaders in business be doing?
So I believe leaders, business owners should be doing a few things. So let's talk about ALLIES. I can't help it, y'all. I just love acronyms. So let's talk about allies for a moment. You mentioned allyship. So the first part, one is just recognizing what an ally is. So it's really this lifelong journey. It's not an identity. It's not a title that you get to give yourself, but it is a verb. It's this action. It's this commitment to a journey of learning, unlearning, and relearning. So then with that comes these 6 things. The A is about awareness. So what are you doing to become more aware of you? So self-awareness and social awareness are the starting blocks of solidarity. So you got to be more emotionally intelligent. What are you doing to help yourself with that? The first L, very intentionally so, is about learning. So you hear so much right now, Marcus, about, we're listening and we're doing listening sessions. And that's great. Listening is our second L. But the reason why we put learning before listening is because we are in 2020. And there are so many incredibly brilliant, amazing professionals who have written books, who have authored studies, who have podcasts, who have documentaries, who have movies. There's so much really great content out there. Aside from careerthrivers.com, I would tell you to definitely tap into the Winters group. Dr. Francis Winters has been doing this work for decades, and they are exceptional at the work that they do. They have tons of resources on their website. That's just one of a myriad of opportunities for you to own your process of learning, just like with anything else that you have questions about, just like anything else that's important. If racial equity is important to you as a leader, then what are you doing to learn? Second, what are you doing to listen? How are you amplifying the voices of Black people at your organization to hear about their experiences? And as you're listening to their experiences, caution your all of our natural lens to kind of want to, be devil's advocate or say, what about this? Or have you thought about that? Like, people are sharing their experiences, like, be open to it. Actively listen, but be open to learning through their lens, right? Which requires empathy, right? So there's this idea of empathy that's built into listening, because empathy is not about you. Empathy is not about me. Empathy is about the other person. The I is around inclusion. So what are you doing as a leader to be intentional in incorporating difference? If you're making decisions about racial equity and there's no racial diversity at the table where the decision is being made, that's a problem. That's a change that needs to be made. The E is about experiences. What are you doing to broaden the breadth and depth of your experiences with Black people? Black culture did not start with slavery. What are you doing to be intentional about learning the culture of Black people in your community as well as professionally at your organization? And then last but not least, what I would not have made it through that Viagra experience without is sponsorship. So the S is for sponsorship. How are you leveraging your power and your privilege to open up the door and create a path to pull up a seat to the table, to make room for someone else that doesn't look like you to sit down? So that's what I would share with leaders.
Okay. So it is awareness, learning, listening, inclusion, experiences, and sponsorship.
Absolutely. And we
Uh,
have a curriculum that's built around that. It's called the Awareness and Actions of Allies. And so most of our work the last couple of weeks have been around introducing that to organizations, either delivering the training or making it available as a white label service for organizations to do a train the trainer certification to take their folks through that model. Because it's part of it. The listening is great. The awareness is wonderful, but what are the actions that your organization is putting behind those intentions? To have a plan, then you take those 6 things and then you develop a plan that actually is representative of the people that you're trying to serve, that really helps to have strong outcomes and something that you can measure.
Wonderful. Just before we go, and thank you again so much,
Sure.
Christina Smith is going to come on, and I'll give her a chance to ask you one question. She's interested
Sure.
in, potentially your coaching. So that's what HR Passion loves to do. I love to connect people. I love
I
it.
love
Love
that.
it. So,
I love that.
Christina Smith, thank you for
Hi.
joining.
Let's see. I'm working from home, so
I
Okay,
love it.
this is your lunch and learn. Tell your boss this is your lunch
There
and
you
learn.
go.
this
There
is
you
lunch and learn. That's what I do while I'm working. I try to include. I was doing a Detroit Startup Week in between all week, and that was fantastic. So thank you, Brittany.
Awesome. Thank
This is
you.
great. I had a few questions, very brief.
Sure.
So first of all, I like carpal tunnel. I've been writing every like verbatim what you're saying here. Thank you. I am going to get your book because I'm very interested. As you can see, I'm a Black woman, and I'm trying to. Well, I am doing a passion of mine, which all of my life since I want to say high school, I've been in finance. So I started at Huntington Bank in 1992, and from then I've had the opportunity, but the passion in me that God gave me was to help Black women in finance. And then obviously, they take that to their family and teach their daughters and their sons and etc. or their husband, whatever. And then because I had to narrow it down because I wanted to do A, B, C, D, F, G. And I said, okay, well, what do you really want to do inside?
Sure. Sure.
So for me, I want to do that. So I have a lot of things on my plate right now. I'm a notary and I'm doing financial education. And I'm in the realm of starting a marketing promotion. So I have a marketing rep and we're going to do he's doing all of that for me. I hired him and I want to hire an intern to do some things for me as far as booking appointments and getting them experience. So, like bringing in a young Black woman and training her that way in business and just starting. So, I'm literally just starting 2 LLCs, as you know, in the midst of working full time. What is your advice? Like, I know because when you're starting, like you have so much research, and like you said, you pull from what you've learned in your past experiences. I've claimed on to different women in the Black women in the corporate world that are way up, and I go, wow, and I learn. But then it's like I'm not ready, So I'm anxious, but I don't know how do you begin that boss territory and go from I'm an LLC, I'm starting. Um, like, what is your advice as a Black woman doing all of this? Like, you're fantastic.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the question, Christina. And I want to commend you because I heard you do something that I think more of us should do. When you started talking, you said, I'm starting to, then you caught yourself and you said, no, I am. I am. I am a firm believer in the power of language, power of the words that you let come out of your mouth. It is an intentional act when you get ready to speak. And so, having the self-awareness to say, oh, no, that's not the right language. I think is wonderful. So continue to do that.
Thank you.
Because that, believe it or not, and I know that you know this, but it shapes what you see. It shapes what you see. And when you couple that with vision,
Mm-hmm.
listen, I could go on for another 30 minutes on that. So I say that to say, excellent.
You look
So, to your question, so you asked me about, so you're working, you also have 2 LLCs, and you're looking to grow your business. So one of the things that I would say is there's definitely a power in focus, right? And simplifying what is a priority now, right? Because if everything is important, then nothing is important. So you got to ask yourself, okay, I've got all of these things going on. Like I spent 4 years side hustling. So I know what it's like to, have a ridiculous workload in terms of my 9 to 5, which when I was in marketing was like an 8 to 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever. I just decided to stop because the work never did.
It just kept going, yeah.
To have that kind of a workload and then say, oh, but I have this passion, this business, I want to grow it. I need the time to, research and figure out and do all the things. So when that's the case, then you have to decide what you're going to prioritize. And I would say just a couple of like really practical things that you can do. Like one of the practical things that I can do, I'm at my laptop and I'm going to pull this off my laptop, is at the end of every day, I put a Post-it note on my laptop with the 3 things. I limit myself to 3. If you are an overachiever, visionary, a person that likes lists, like I have Post-it notes out, it's 3 things that need to get done for the following day. And if I don't do it the night before, I get up in the morning before I start, because you just do, especially as a business owner, you're like, okay, there's a never ending list of things that I need to do. But what are the 3 things that if you get these 3 things done, it will help you then open up the pathway to other things that are priorities. So I would say that's a practical thing that you can do to help you focus. But then in terms of your strategy, you've got to get laser focused on what is the priority. So maybe, and I'm just throwing this out here, you would, of course, make the decision on this, but maybe you focus on one of the 2 LLCs right now, because there is a true power and an accelerating type of power in focusing in on a silo, especially if you are offering a service. So the thing about branding is that branding is just about belief. So we say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, branding is in the eye of the beholder. It's about what does your potential customer think or believe about you. And that then is based on what you're marketing to them. So some people think branding and marketing is the same thing. It's not. So like marketing is like what you're pushing out. So then you have to ask yourself, well, what am I sharing with people about me? And oftentimes what happens is people are sharing 10 different things about them and wonder why people don't understand what they do, especially in terms of a business when you are looking to make a transaction happen. So if people are confused, my coach always says a confused mind does nothing. If people are confused, they don't do anything. If people are on your website and they don't know exactly where to go or what to do, or how, like we're in need of a website update right now. It's just been crazy with allyship curriculum. And
I'm going to interrupt real quick. Mm-hmm. Because this is popping up when I was saying like the marketing, like God brought this to me. He brought me this marketing rep and he was like, he's a family member and he's an up and coming videographer, social media guru. He's been doing it, but he was like, this is a passion and I want to do it with people that are passionate in their business. So God brought him to me. And he wants to tell 3 stories in my brand. Well, I want to say marketing because he wants people to know about me. Mm-hmm. That I'm here, but who is she? Mm-hmm. What is she going to do for us out here?
Right.
Who is she talking to? And so my story, he has 3 stories. So one is my professionalism, how I got to my career. The other one is my lifestyle change, my belief. Mm-hmm. And another one is women empowerment, how like my daughter, my cousins, those people that are around.
Yeah. Those things, the reason why he's saying that he needs you to share those things, because those things build what's called your know, like, and trust factor. So people do business with people that they know. You can't like and trust somebody if you don't know them. And you can't get to know somebody if they're not telling you anything about them.
Yeah.
So I had to get over that myself because I am actually naturally an introvert in all of the
Me
ways.
too. I
So I
am.
had to get over this sense of like, oh well, this feels self-perform, this feels like self-promotion and like, I'm just talking about me, but like that is an entire that's mindset garbage. Like that is a mindset block that some people have around sharing their expertise. I'll share quickly. Google has an initiative called I Am Remarkable that is about women and self-promotion. They don't call it self-promotion, but that's essentially what it is. Being okay sharing about your experiences, your expertise, your brilliance, and doing it in a confident way that I think is really great. So he's doing that with you so that you can build your know, like, and trust factor so that then once people know you, they like you, they trust you, then they're ready to buy something, right? And so again, with that in mind, you want to think about as you're sharing that with people and as you're introducing yourself and introducing your product or service, it is oftentimes helpful if you align on the one thing that you want people to know relative to what you are offering. So a great example of that, the lipstick that I have on today is from the Lip Bar.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. The Lip Bar out of Detroit, Melissa Butler is the CEO, and she started out the Lip Bar selling lipstick. I usually have a tube at my desk, but I think I took it in the bathroom to put it on right before I got on here. So she started out selling lipstick, right? So it's this idea of monetizing and building brand loyalty with a single product or having your silo. That's what she did with lipstick. It's what Eric Thomas did with speaking. Right now you go to E.T., the hip hop preacher, and he has a podcast and he does courses and he has other personalities under his brands and he does events, but he didn't start out doing all those things. He built a really strong root. He built really strong roots and started to build a tree that was able to bear other fruit off of his one thing, which was speaking. So I would ask you to think about what is your one thing. And it's not to say the other things don't matter or the other things aren't coming, but what is the one thing that you're going to prioritize and focus as a way to really ground, again, that brand equity with your target customer or client so they know, hey, when I think about Christina does this and I know it and I get it and I see it from her. I'm hearing about her results. She's got some testimonials, all of the things. And then they associate that service or that product with you, which then allows you, because you built that trust, to open up the door to start doing other things. And so that's the advice I would share with you in
That's
terms
right.
of really get
because God told me that my ending, like you said, boom of business is going to be helping women with staffing. So I have a bachelor's degree in HR, and it was my passion. I was like, because I want to help people. I know how to get a job. I want to get them a job. Like, you don't have a job, I'm going to get you a job. Like, that's me. What do you do? Let's do this. And I'm like the cover letter girl. I'm like hey, what are you about? Like Marcus and yourself were talking about, like being authentically you and you fitting into the goals and the visions and everything in that workspace. Because you want to be you want to grow you in that company or in that vision. So I know that. And so I'll see something about somebody. I'll go, oh, you would be great for this. I'm so excited and I'm ready for them, and they get it and they're like, you are right. This is, and I get excited. And so I know that a lot of minority women, we don't get excited, or, we don't know how to get excited to know, like, because when I applied for this job I have now, I was in an interview excited. I was like, yes, you want me. I'm great. And they're like, yes, we do. You're hired. Like they didn't even know what to do because they knew I did my research. They knew that I
fit our passion. That's what you were.
Yeah. And they're like, we can't deny you're great. So you did all your work. You know how you fit in here. And I'm like, well, like, so then what is this company about? I want to fit in, but do you fit me? And so my ending goal that God told me I'm going to do is passionately get Black women. And like you said, I'm narrowing the niche down, or probably others, but I see the need more in my community with people that look like me, like you said. So I appreciate everything that, I got 3 pages. I got 3 pages.
I love it. And I'll let you know too, we're actually doing a free training on July the 23rd at 7 p.m. It's called Career Storytelling, Creating Your Personal Brand by Design, Not by Default. And again, I think that's a Thursday. It's July 23rd at 7. And the link, it's a bit.ly link. So it's bit.ly/LY, and it's Design My Brand. And so you can go on there. Registration is free. You can reserve your seat. There are only 100 spots because I think she set it up as I think it's set up as a webinar. Yeah, so there are 100 seats for that. But really excited about it. It's going to be a training, so bring your stuff to take notes. We'll probably send out to a framework to help you walk through, but just really want to help people with storytelling because it's such a skill. And when you think about, again, this idea of creating the story, you got to create it, but then you got to communicate it. And so this session will be about helping people to create and communicate your career story in a clear, concise, and compelling way.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus,
for coming on with your questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
So, Brittany, where can people reach you? People like Christina who might want to, have your services, where can they reach you?
Sure. So definitely make sure you check out the Career Thrivers podcast. So wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google, iTunes, you can check me out there. We release episodes every week. And also you can check me out at our next training. So again, that link is bit.ly/design my brand. It's a career storytelling training that'll be really helpful for you. And then as always, careerthrivers.com. That's our website. You can check me out there. And I'm on social media at Career Thrivers. My personal Instagram is Brittany Cole. And I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Wonderful. Brittany Cole, thank you so much. I am so appreciative of your time. We'd love to have you back when the book is out so that we can talk more about resilience with your experience and expertise in diversity and inclusion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.